All right, well, we are at 2:30. So welcome everyone to this first concurrent session on the topic of modeling in the earth sciences. We have 3 presentations today. The total time for each presentation is 15 minutes, so it'll be roughly 10 to 12 minutes of presentation and then a quick Q&A at the end of the presentation until we get to the 15 minutes. But we do have a whole 15 minutes at the end of the 3 presentations, and so we can have a much more detailed discussion then. So what I would suggest is please put in your initial questions, anything that you want the speakers to sort of respond to right at the end of their presentation in the Zoom chat. And if you have something that's more open-ended and maybe something for a much larger discussion, then please use the Google Doc that's been linked in the Kiko chat so that we can cover those in the last 15 minutes and then maybe do the more quicker ones via the Zoom chat, because then that's going to be scrolling through and it might be a little hard to sort of go back and catch them later. So if you could do that, that would be great. Our first presentation today is from my colleague, Iluk Kim from Purdue University. He's going to be presenting SWOT-Share, a collaborative cyber infrastructure for hydrologic research and education using the SWOT model. I believe this is pre-recorded. I do want to mention that we've been having internet issues here in West Lafayette, so he's going to be jumping into his car and driving to campus. So he won't be able to answer questions at the end of his 10 minutes of recorded presentation, but he will be around to answer questions in the end. So if you could hold your questions to the end of the hour, that would be great. Thanks. All right, Mike, take it away.
Hello, everyone. My name is Iluk Kim from Purdue University, and I'm going to present a demo for SWOT-Share, a collaborative cyber infrastructure for hydrologic research and education using SWOT model. Scientists continue to develop complex modeling software to study hydrological processes. These models tend to be computation intensive, involving large volumes of data, which takes a long time to process. Therefore, it has become important to develop a solution providing data sharing and measurements and simulation cyber infrastructure to help scientists. In this demo, we introduce SWOT-Share, an interactive online environment for soil and water assessment tool. SWOT-Share provides a place that users can publish and share SWOT models, discover others, perform model simulation using high-performance computing, and visualize the outputs. This project has been funded in part by the NSF. We first talk about the architecture of a SWOT-Share system. This is a brief architecture of our system. It consists of the 3 main components: front-end, back-end, and external resource. The front end of SWOT-Share is a web application hosted on MyGeoHub, which is a Hub0-based science gateway for geospatial data and model analysis. And the back end of the system provides a set of services for handling user requests received through the SWOT-Share web interface. Specifically, the Apache and the Tomcat web service process the request from the front end, then connect to other services in the back end, and furthermore to external resources. The external resources include the GeoServer for rendering maps and computational resources from Exceed or Purdue campus cluster. Also, SWOT-Share interoperates with HydroShare for users to access large-scale hydrologic user community. Now we are going to talk about the SWOT-Share user interface. SWOT-Share's user interface is consisted of 4 tabs: Discover, My Models, Simulations, and Visualization. We're going to see the demo for each tabs in detail. First, let's talk about the Discovery tab. The Discovery tab provides an interactive map for users to explore models uploaded into our platform based on geographic location. Also, users can list all of the existing models and search for models by name or metadata. For example, they can search models of their own or public models from other users. They can also see the models with calibration type only. If a user clicks on model, information of the model will be shown, including full metadata and a shape image. The next tab is My Models. In this tab, users can manage models they have uploaded before. They can list their own models and see the model's information. If a user clicks one model, SWOT Share shows the details of the model, such as basic information, including description or keywords, and metadata that the user entered were automatically extracted. Users can also modify the information of the model, like make it to private or changing the name. Users can create new models with their SWOT model files. When a new model is uploaded, the system performs some pre-processing, such as sanity checking and creating data for visualization. SWOT Share also automatically extracts a set of metadata about the model. Users need to enter the rest of the metadata by completing an online form. When the new model is created, it can be used for simulation and visualization. Also, it's discoverable for other users. Next, let's talk about the Simulation tab. The simulation interface allows users to submit new simulations and manage running and finished ones. Let's see an example of submitting a new simulation. First, users need to choose one model that they have uploaded before. Then, SWOT Share gets some basic information, such as simulation name or SWOT executable version that they want to use. Simulation type can be normal simulation, sensitive analysis, or auto-calibration. For the calibration type, users can set more details like number of generations or iterations, objective function type, and one or multiple objective variables. Users also need to upload their observed data file that can be used for the calibration. Next step is to add parameters. Users can use sample data that we provide or select and enter parameter data of their own specifically. Lastly, if users leave email addresses, SWOT Share will send a notification when the simulation is finished. After entering all of the information, users can see a brief review here, and if everything is okay, they can submit the simulation. In this tab, users can also manage the submitted simulations, such as monitoring status, accessing log files, and downloading outputs. When we select a simulation, our system shows metadata including basic properties that users entered or simulation results. For the calibration type, users can see more details of their inputs and can download calibrated outputs. Moreover, users can visualize the calibrated model with uploaded observation data after the simulation completes. It shows the shape image of the base model and location of the selected subbasin. And the interactive line chart shows daily stream flow of data set from the calibration outputs and observed data. The simulation log produced during the execution can be seen in here as well. The last tab is visualization. In the visualization tab, users can dynamically create temporal plots and spatial maps for selected variables. They can visualize SWOT output data included in the model file by selecting a model, or they can also use outputs generated from a simulation result by selecting a completed simulation. When an output is selected, Users will see metadata and can choose some options. They can select a different temporal resolutions regardless of the original model's resolution with visualization timestamp option. And SwapShare provides two types of visualization, temporal plots and spatial maps. Let's see the temporal visualization first. In order to draw the temporal plots, users first need to choose date range depends on the resolution they selected from the previous screen. Also, they need to select one or multiple output variables they want to include for the temporal visualization. When users click the Draw Plots button, the time series plots of the selected variables are created on the screen dynamically. Users can explore the created plots and zoom in and out them to see some specific date range. They can also download images of the created plots and raw data files. Next visualization type is spatial maps. We're going to change the resolution from daily to monthly at this time. Like the temporal visualization before, users can choose date range and output variables they want to include. When the Draw Plot button is clicked, our system dynamically creates spatial maps in the backend and deliver them to SwapShare. Users will see the maps with color scale for the selected output variables. They can explore created spatial maps and can change date by clicking the arrow buttons for each variables. Or they can use the slider component to change at once. Moreover, we provide animation feature to see the changes continuously. SwapShare has been published to the public for many years and used for educational purpose from Purdue and Texas A&M universities. Currently, there are about 400 users, 500 models,
So that's where the video ends right there. It's only, so
That's weird. Okay, I think he must have just cut it off when he reached 12 minutes, but that's okay. I do know that Elok is driving to campus now. He should be here in 15 minutes. So he'll, like I mentioned before, he'll be here in the last 15 minutes to answer questions about this. So if anyone has any questions, please do put it either in the chat or you can put it in the Google Doc that's shared on the Kiko interface. And I'll go through them in the last 15 minutes and we'll have Elok answer them. I hope that should work out. But let's wait for 2 minutes just because I don't know if people are wanting to join this next talk and they're looking to join at the 15-minute mark. We'll start the next one at 2:45. So I guess everyone can have 2 minutes to grab coffee or something else. But just so we can have things moving. Forrest, do you want to check to see if you can share your screen?
Yeah, let me try that.
Awesome.
Are you able to see those slides?
Yep. Looks great.
Okay, it must be working.
All right, we're at 2:45. So Our second speaker is Forrest Hoffman. He is going to be talking about land model testbed, accelerating development, benchmarking, and analysis of land surface models. Take it away, Forrest.
Thank you, Rajesh. And thanks for the opportunity to present today in the Gateways 2020 conference. My colleagues and I have done some work in a project that was funded at Oak Ridge National Laboratory to kind of extend some efforts that we've had in model development and in model evaluation. And I'm going to talk to you today about some of the additional work that we've done here to make tools more accessible to model developers and model users. We called this the Land Model Testbed, or LMT project. And the main idea was to develop a workflow that would allow us to execute a collection of land surface models on big hardware like the Summit machine, which is the #2 in the top 500 fastest computers in the world, which is located at Oak Ridge National Lab, and to be able to then, after running maybe thousands of simultaneous simulations, evaluate them in an intelligent way and look at functional relationships and try to understand the behavior of the models through comparisons with observational data that would then inform us about additional model development that was required, or other ways to perturb the models in such a way that we could do this in a rapid, organized way. So we developed this workflow and tested it both on the Summit machine and on a sort of cloud system that lives inside the laboratory. We developed tools to do post-processing. We developed a dashboard capability that we applied not only to our own model evaluation capability, but to other packages as well. Some of the work that we did facilitated methods for providing model output to a CMIP activity. And so this is used by the IPCC for their assessment reports. So we do some simulations this way. And so a lot of the tools that we developed through this project actually benefited our work on CMIP as well. This effort kind of centers around this ILAM package, this International Land Model Benchmarking Package, which we've developed through a DOE, Department of Energy funded activity to evaluate models. And what you see here is a whole suite of variables down the left-hand side in the figure on the left, and a whole bunch of models across the top. And this evaluation allows us to see the relative performance of models in comparison with a variety of observational data sets. And then for every one of the variables on the left-hand side, you can see for the hydrological cycle, for instance, you can click on them and open up additional lists. So every one of these lines that appears with blue text represents a different data set, a different way that we can evaluate that variable. And so we run this big suite of analyses across all of these models, and then we can look at their relative performance. And an interesting thing coming out of this effort right now is that you'll see the more brown colors on the left and more blue colors on the right, because the left-hand models are older generation models from the CMIP-5 activity, and the models on the right are newer models from the CMIP-6 activity. And so this is something that we're doing to try to determine how much models may have improved over the 5 to 7 years in between these CMIP activities that we have, and whether that's attributable to improvements in the forcing versus improvements in the characteristics of the land surface model itself. So that's sort of sitting at the heart of the diagnostics system that we have. And I'm going to turn the pointer on here so I can point you to different things. But our entire workflow consisted of a suite of scripts for taking the land models and running them either through this CADES cloud system at ORNL or through the Summit machine. And then out of all of those runs, and possibly thousands of them, we then feed that back into our LMT, our land model testbed system, to run ILAM, do all the post-processing and data conversion that's needed in order to then run our ILAM diagnostics and benchmarking, and then look at the results both through a unified dashboard that I'm going to present in a moment, and this Jupyter notebook system. In addition to that, we developed bunch of tools that allow us to share these model results through a globally interconnected set of systems called the Earth System Grid Federation, so that our model results can then be made available to the wider community who are also evaluating them for various kinds of applications and impacts analysis and things that go into these large assessment reports. Our kind of premier use case is this idea of a perturbed parameter ensemble. And the idea there is that we need this capability to do many thousands of model simulations where we're tweaking parameters in order to kind of understand the sensitivity of the model to those parameters, which tells us how well we need to measure them, and to develop sort of an optimized suite of these parameters so that we get the actual performance, so that our results compared with the ILAM are the best they can be out of the land model. So we developed this framework with the capability to launch many thousands of instances on the Summit machine, for instance. So we have concurrent model execution, and we optimize the performance so that we could generate these large ensembles with varying parameter suites and reduce the workflow from 12 hours to 10 minutes on a single node on Summit. So that was pretty major performance improvement that we realized through this effort. And then we've done work in Jupyter Lab to allow us to do this interactive analysis. So we deploy this on high memory computational nodes so that we can read in lots of this model output simultaneously. But by using Jupyter Lab and Jupyter Notebooks, this allows us a reproducible and shareable way of doing our analysis. And then any papers that we write will point to a GitHub repo that has the Jupyter Notebooks and access to the data so that you can rerun it all yourself and make changes to it. And we think this is the way that we should be doing science these days. In addition to that, parts of the ILAM Python software can be used as a library of diagnostic tools, especially for file handling. So you see basically that there are very few Python commands here that are referencing our tools in order to read a large amount of model output and give, for instance, very simple plots of seasonal cycle of, in this case, gross primary productivity across a collection of models. As a part of this, we also developed some new Ensemble Diagnostics that allow you to kind of move your mouse over different parts of these violin plots. And this isn't active right now. This is just a static image. But if it were active, you would see that wherever I was, for instance, in this parameter, then bars would appear and be highlighted in other violin plots so that you could see, for instance, what combination of parameters gives me the best bias score, right? So where am I least biased in my model by doing that? And this plot in the bottom center, this annual cycle, is something that's redrawn as you move across all of these various parameters, and you can see how well you match the annual cycle that's actually coming from the observations. So this gives us a nice way to play with parameters, do lots of simulations, and then evaluate that output and try to understand what's the compromise between all of the parameters that go into this model that give me the best combination for whatever my target is. And for this, in this case, it's that annual cycle of gross primary productivity. And in another activity, we've developed this dashboard that I alluded to earlier, and it allows us to put a better front end picture on that ILAM system. It allows us to kind of swap, for instance, the variables and data sets down the left-hand side with the models across the top. So we can kind of swap the rows and columns here. We can also move all the rows around and move the columns around so that we can get kind of the picture we want. So if we're interested in comparing this BCC model with this other BCC model, we can just drag them over next to each other so that we have them side by side, and then compare them, for instance, to the mean CMIP6 model. And this gives us also the ability to turn on our score numbers that appear in the little boxes here, which gives us more information about how well are these models actually doing, in addition to what their relative performance is by looking at the colors. So this gives us a real nice interactive capability on trying to understand now what the results mean after we've spent so much effort developing the tools to provide them. We still have the human problem of trying to understand what they mean. The nice thing about the unified dashboard is that it reads standard JSON files, and we can take somebody else's diagnostics, for instance, those produced by the PCMDI metrics package, and put our front-end dashboard on the front of their diagnostics. And so you can do the same thing here, and you get this interactive capability. You can click on a box and pull up any one of their diagnostics. And we can host this on our website. So the people who ran those other diagnostics may or may not even know that we have this other dashboard working. And the idea here is that we want to be able to then combine lots of analysis capabilities from different packages together and provide a single unified interface for users into that information. Another thing that we've developed kind of on the backside, the post-processing, is a way of trying to map what our model output variables are into a bunch of standard variable names that are used in these large collaborative activities like CMIP. And so there's a little tool here that builds the sort of list of equations and processing and integration, spatial and temporal integration that needs to be done to provide that set of output variables that then we can offer to the Earth System Grid Federation.
Good. One more
little. Okay, thank you. One more thing that we've done is applied machine learning to look at empirical relationships. So we used a random forest machine learning method to predict net carbon ecosystem exchange, both from observations on that left-hand column of figures and from the land model output itself, from a whole bunch of these simulations that we ran with different parameters. And you can see that we do a pretty good job of capturing what NEE would be based on those other forcing factors in the model. But you'll also see that the models and the observations have different relative importance for those same variables. So clearly, what's coming out of the model is not quite representative of what we know from the observations. So this informs us that we need to go back and use other kinds of metrics like this to figure out how to improve models. So we've developed a suite of tools and capabilities. We're going to be doing more of these perturbed parameter ensembles on multiple models. So we're looking forward to that. Now we have the ability to do much more work in developing more dashboards collaboratively with other activities and other projects, and do more tool development. And we think this is a growing area for ripe for improving models and working collaboratively across large projects, doing this kind of climate and Earth system modeling. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Forrest, for that really interesting presentation. So yeah, if anyone has any questions, please do put it in the Zoom chat. We can take maybe 1 or 2 questions now. If you have others, then you can put it in the shared doc in the Kiko chat, and then we'll go over them in the last 15 minutes. So while people are typing stuff in, I have a question for us. So you mentioned workflow. So is the workflow part of evaluating a particular model, or is it actually running like coupled models in like a certain order? What does the workflow really do?
Yeah, so right now it runs a single model, but we have 2 models kind of installed in the test bed. And the idea is that we can create simultaneous simulations of any number of those models and perturb their parameters. So right now we're using the E3SM land model and the community land model, but it's extensible. So we built this framework so that we could plug other land models in there, figure out what their inputs are, what their outputs are, and be able to translate between those models. So the idea is that it's sort of a test harness for running lots of land models.
Okay. And so this is mainly to provide information to users or researchers who might use these models, right? So does it also support like people actually coming in and doing their own runs of these models, or do you expect that they would just take the model and then run it on their own resources?
Yeah, so we want to provide that front end. What we haven't done yet is provided the Jupyter front end for actually setting up those simulations. Right now it's script based, so you have to come in and get an account. But you pretty much have to do that anyway because we really designed them to run simultaneously on these large compute resources. So you need to have an account on those already.
Right.
But once you have that, we can show you how to set it up and do it. We've invested more time on the backside to give you the interactive analysis tools and capabilities. So, and a way of publishing our model results so that people can use them that way. And that can be done anywhere on any kind of fat memory systems.
Got it. All right. Well, thanks for those clarifications. Since we're at 3 right now, we'll move on to the next presentation. And yeah, please, if anyone has any questions, please do put it in the shared doc and Kiko. I know there's a question about SWOT in there that we'll get to in the last 15 minutes. But if you have questions for Forrest, please do put it in there. Our third and last presentation for this session is Jung-Ha Woo. He's from Purdue as well. He's going to be talking about Isomap, a science gateway for isotopic landscape modeling. Go ahead, Jung-Ha.
Okay. Do you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Okay, hello everyone. My name is Jung-Ha Woo, a software engineer at Purdue University Research Computing. Today I'm going to talk about Isomap, a science gateway for isotopic landscape modeling. So Isomap is an online workspace for spatial analysis and modeling and prediction tool for the stable isotope ratio variation. So what are isotopes? Isotopes are different forms of the same element. So all isotopes have the same protons, same number of protons, but different number of neutrons. So one is heavier than the other. The ratio between those heavy and light element is called the isotope ratio. And these ratios change over time and space, and they are recorded in the animal tissues. So if we can track the history of the isotope level or the isotope ratio, we can do research about the animal migration and human movement or the origins. So our portal allows users to explore, develop, and implement models for the isotopic ratio. And it has been in production for 11 years, since 2010. And we have a large user base, 2,400 users and 14,000 simulations. And it has also been used for some training events and graduate level short courses. So the picture you see in these slides was taken from the isotopic application in ecological studies in 2018. So let's see the architecture. Isomap architecture is quite straightforward. So Isomap web pages displays the maps using the open layers and GeoServer. And the users build a model, and the actual model runs on the backend Purdue cluster. And we do the statistical analysis. Basically, the first one is the linear regression, and the second one is geostatistics. And once we generate that isotopic models, we can apply that model to the interested area and space. So isoscapes are the result of the isotopic models. Sometimes isoscapes is the isotopic landscape or the prediction map. So model and the prediction results are stored in the NFS file system. And those results are registered at the GeoServer so that users can look up and check their prediction map makes sense or not. And the Apache Solr search engine was used for users to search the models they want to use for generating prediction map. So it allows users to search by the model type or the spatial condition or the temporal condition or even the case number and so on. In this slide shows the workflows of the Isomap. First, we build a model and then use that model to generate a raster file, the isoscapes. And that isoscape can be used for either finding origin of animals or the estimating the plant water map precipitation map. Here we focus on the linear regression statistics. So the basic idea is finding the relationship between y and axis. Here the y is the isotopic ratio, and x variables are the climate variable or environmental variables. So both y and axis are known. The isotopic level at level database is compiled by the Professor Bowen, our PI, and he collected those data from the IAEA stations and also from the laboratory data. And the climate data comes from multiple data sources, CRU, PRISM, eTopo. Basically, those data are the precipitation, maximum temperature, minimum temperature, vapor pressure, elevation, and so on. Those values are measured on the stations are used for the linear regression. So the goal here is, since we know x and y's, we want to estimate those coefficients, alpha, beta 1, beta 2, and so on, so that once we have this linear equation, we can predict isotopic ratio for any place in the world. Yeah, so we chose variable and data source. And then, although the researchers can use the whole past historical data, but they may only interested in the certain time and area of the data to form their models. So in that case, we can pose the spatial and temporal filters. For example, I can only use the station in United States or Europe, or Africa for a certain time, like past year or past 10 year or specific period, like 1980 to 1990. So by using those climate data and the observational data, we form the isotopic model and then apply that model to any place the researchers wants to use. And then the result will be the map, predictive map, the raster file you will see in the right side. And from that, you can go either direction. So using that prediction map, you can try to find where isotope came from, or you can do the plant model prediction. Plant model is pretty much same as the precipitation model, but it deals or predicts the isotopic ratio in plant leaves. So the output is quite similar to the predicted map. So now it's time to demo. In this demo, I'll show you how to create a model and how to use that model to predict or to create a prediction map. So do you see the my Chrome browser?
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, cool. So this is the Isomap page. You can either go to the isomap.org or in this page, both. Yeah, if you go to the isomap.org, you will be redirected to this page. And if you don't have the account, you can click the register button and make a sign up for the new account for free. Since I have the account already, I log in and go to the precipitation model. So basically, yeah. So first step here is choosing the temporal period you want to use for the data. So in this case, by default, it used 1980, from 1980 to the 1990. I will choose the summer months from the 1985 to 1990, and then click the arrow button. The next, I want to use only the United States station. Then I can choose I can select the area only for the United States. And the next step is now you can choose the dependent variable Y. Our portal supports isotopic ratio for either hydrogen and oxygen. So either is fine. I will use hydrogen. And as I said before, you can select as many variables you want to use for explaining the dependent variable. For the demo, I will use maximum temperature and precipitation. This one has only one source, the maximum temperature, but for this selected period and selected area, there are two different sources. I will use station, and sometimes you can use either the intact form or the squared form or absolute form of the variable. So if you click that, it pre-validates, it checks whether you have enough valid stations in the selected area. So in this case, we are succeeded. Let's see, the model 1019 first. Then click the button. So now you can see the job status is created. Yeah, it only takes a few seconds. So you can either wait or go to the precipitation model and check the Explorer model. Explorer model shows the statistical property of the linear regression. So how well the model fits the data. It shows those information. And the next demo is, then we know we already created a model. Then how can we create a prediction map? So in this case, you pick the model. It only displays a model. So I pick the first one and choose the next button. Because that model was created for the United States, by default, it was displayed here. But you're not restricted there. You can choose the temporal period, and you can choose Europe. Basically, you're applying the model constructed from the United States, but apply that to Europe or the whole, all over the maps. And then click and data set. It makes some time for the pre-validation. So it will take some time. Let's go back to, okay, it's succeeded. So that prediction, 2020 and 19 first. And then you will see your job will be updated here. Let's go back to the slide. Yeah, let's go there. Yeah, we also provided the REST API as well. So our model and the prediction map results can be pulled from outside by using the Isomap ID and password. So one example is advanced users wants to use the result from the Isomap and then do a more advanced, more technical analysis on their own machine. So in this case, they can get all the jobs or specific job. They can query specific type of jobs. And also they can also download the zip file for the results. So the summary is Isomap is in production for more than 10 years and has larger user base and can be connected to third-party analysis software. And we are collaborating with the many diverse area. And in the future, we're thinking of extending our platform to cover other element, such as we only cover hydrogen and oxygen, but in the future we may cover carbon and nitrogen. And we are currently working with the strontium data sets for using the assignment model. And yeah, that's it for now. And our Science Gateway address is here. And if you have any question, please send me or Lan email about any questions. Thank you.
So thanks, Jungha. Yeah, so I think we have a couple of minutes for questions specifically to Jungha, and then we have 15 minutes until 3:30 to discuss any of the 3 papers that were presented here. So if you have any questions, please put them in the Zoom chat. You can also put them in the shared doc in Kiko, and I'll be going over there occasionally to see if there's any questions in there. I know there's a question for Look, but let's start with questions for Jungha first. So while we have other questions coming in, let me ask you a question.
Sure.
The regression model that you showed, where the user has the opportunity to select the dependent and independent, well, the independent variables. In your experience, how well do researchers, I guess, respond to that? Do you think is it easy for them to sort of figure out what they think the independent variables would be for the model, or how successful is the?
Yeah, they can do. In general, when users include the longitude and latitude, their accuracy goes up. So the accuracy in terms of the R-square value. So R-square, if the R-square value is close to 100, that can explain this best. In our case, if you miss longitude and latitude, then the general accuracy goes down. So around, yes, in some case I saw 30% or 40% of accuracy. So the experienced user typically include the longitude, and yeah, you can check the accuracy and revise your model from the Explorer model tab. So that's why that's how the typical users do for the improvement.
Are there any other questions for Jungha? This is a really quiet group. All right, let me ask you another question then.
Sure.
So you talked about the data sets that you use, the various spatial, the CRU and all of the PRISM and all of those data sets. So and you mentioned that these jobs are running on a cluster. So are these data sets hosted somewhere that the cluster has access to? How do you manage how the jobs get access to the data sets?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, yes. The raw climate data set are stored in the depot data space, and it is mounted to the Purdue cluster. So while the backend script is running, they can also access the backend the raw data set.
So how large are these data sets? If you had to move the processing to a different cluster, how much data would you have to transfer?
I think in total, it will be about 5 gig to 10 gig size.
Okay, so it's not too big then.
Yeah, but it gets updated monthly. So all the resolution of my data set is monthly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Do we have any other questions for Jungha? I don't see any in the chat. Let's switch to the question about SWOT share that is in the Kiko shared doc. So Iluk, you're here, right?
Yes.
Okay, I see you there. All right. So there's a question for you. How big is the data you allow users to upload? Is download allowed? If so, how big can the data set be that you can download?
Okay. So systematically, the maximum file size our system allows is 8.5 gigabyte. But so far, we haven't seen or tested that big models But I see that several models having around 1 GB size though. So yet I guess that's the normal size of the model. And also downloading model is allowed. You can download it your own model file or public model as well. And I believe there's no limitation for downloading.
Okay. I don't know who put in that question. I hope that answered your question. If not, you can unmute yourself and ask any clarifications, since we don't have any other questions at the moment. So I guess while everyone else is thinking, we can see if there's a follow-up to that.
Great.
Okay.
Hi, Rajesh. Should we just all unmute and maybe that'll warm us up for questions? Discussion.
I'm sorry, Marl. I didn't catch the last bit. What you
I
said.
was wondering, could we all just unmute maybe and?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah. Go ahead. I mean, yeah, just everyone unmute, and then you can discuss, I guess, whatever you want. That'll sort of get us going, I guess. Yeah, you don't have to, I guess, stand to protocol here.
So maybe this is a Science Friday question, but I'll ask it for the three speakers. What are in your field, after making your presentation and listening to the other two speakers, what are there some common challenges or opportunities within or science gateways that that you would identify as grand challenges or as interesting challenges for the field?
Yeah, so everyone can just take a shot at that. You can just go in order. Maybe we'll have Iluk go first, and then Jungha and Forrest after that.
I don't know, but I feel that there are a lot of users, and we require some specific format for the model, like where to put file, where to put like model shape files, and also for the simulation, user need to create their own observation file, and it also has the format. So user need to learn how to create that file format. So I think that's the one challenge that we need to educate or make it sure there's no errors. So I think that's one challenge I can think of.
Okay, Jungha?
Sorry, I muted myself.
That's okay.
Yeah, that's a good question. So actually, for the raw data set access, we improved our system we previously using the legacy code for the data import and processing, but recently we just finished the rewriting every code into using the PostGIS code. So I think that is the good approach, but in practice, the performance is downgraded because the older system is computing for the limited resource, because we are not sending the job to the backend cluster. We are doing everything on the virtual machine. So even though the approach itself is good, we're experiencing the performance issue. So that is one issue that is my first challenge. And the other one is when I imported every raw data set into PostgreSQL database, the problem is when the execute node trying to access the central PostgreSQL database, how can we synchronize the database between multiple nodes when multiple nodes read and write? So that is another challenge I need to try to solve. Otherwise, we need to go back to the legacy code.
That actually sounds like an interesting technical challenge. I wonder if someone from like, I don't know if there's anyone from NCAR or any of those groups in here, but I'm sure they work with like constantly updated data and having to run models on data that's been collected. So I wonder if someone from there has any ideas on that.
Yeah, yeah, any idea will be very welcomed.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, so Forrest, do you want to talk about the grand challenges in your domain?
Well, I think a grand challenge across all these modeling and evaluation and observationally driven systems is, how to deal with the data. And, as Younghwa was just talking about, in a database is one method. A lot of the stuff that we deal with in the global climate system won't really fit in a database because we're taking lots and lots of satellite data. And grinding it and processing it. So I think there are big data challenges and of course opportunities for improving data reduction across all of our domains. For running the models, that was a common theme, I think, that we were all talking about. And so, that's why our approach has been to try to build a model farm to support arbitrary kinds of models. We're starting with land surface models that run within Earth system models, but we're also talking to the hydrology community about subsurface runoff models and flow and transport models, and really trying to engage that community as well. And then, evaluating the models against observations is the thing to do now. We're getting enough observations that's a real sustainable, and how they perform against observations is what's actually important. So the focus on just compare, beauty contests between 10 different models with no reference to observations is sort of not in vogue anymore, which is good. That means that, we have enough data that we can do these model data comparisons. And so ILAM was our approach at trying to do that in a very general way. But of course, there are a lot of other diagnostics packages out there, which is why we really focused on trying to develop a dashboard that would allow us to connect to those other tools and diagnostics, and maybe build a front end system that people could have, maybe just to look at INSO metrics, for instance. But across the atmosphere domain, the ocean domain, and the land domain, can we develop an interface across those packages that allow somebody to focus on a phenomenon that spans those realms? And so our focus has been to try to pull these things together and build more unified interfaces, both to the models and to the resulting output in diagnostics.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And thanks, Marlon, for, I guess, warming us up with that question. That raises a lot of, I guess, interesting tangential sort of questions there. And just to sort of, I guess, tag on to what you were just saying, Forrest. So eLook's talk was about SWOT models, and I guess that's mainly in the hydrology realm. So the dashboard that you have, I think that's something that could really be useful in all these other domains. And there's the big question of like gateway interoperability and how do people connect resources together. So do you have any thoughts on how maybe different gateways that do these kinds of modeling projects can leverage some of the metrics and the ideas that you have with respect to evaluating models?
So, our focus has been in the Earth system modeling community, and we fortunately have some real data standards there. So we, store everything in NetCDF formats with following the climate and forecasting, or the CF convention. And that provides a convention for units and how we store the data and how we orient everything. And that's also been extended to provide geospatial information and coordinates as well. And so we find that standard really nice because we can write a diagnostics package that can just open that file, figure out what this is, how to map it, how to display it, and how to compare it with other things. So we build that intelligence into the diagnostics package because we have those well-established data standards. And I know not all domains have those data standards. And so that presents a challenge to people. On the interface side, we've written tools to read other output. And so following this kind of interfaces, we can build these tables of diagnostics and provide that nice front end. And so I would encourage, further development along the JSON path. And if people are going to be writing their own kinds of diagnostics and providing interface to them, that they work with the NOAA MDTF, this Model Diagnostics Task Force, or the DOE CMEC activity. So both of these are developing a common standard together to allow interoperability amongst all of their diagnostics packages.
Okay, that's really interesting. Well, and that sort of gets us to the end of the session as well. It's 3:30. So there is a poster showcase and sponsor exhibits that Catherine was mentioning. I think that's at 4 p.m. So you still have a half-an-hour break before then. And you can join that just by going into the Kiko chat and then finding that listing there and just click on the link there. But thanks everyone for joining the session. You had some really interesting talks and a really great discussion. Thanks again, Marlon, for sort of teeing us off on that. And have a good rest of your conference.